Welcome to Chatting Dog Podcast. My name is Olaleko Oshinkoya. I'm your host. Uh, it's another opportunity to host another episode of this great show. Chatting Dog is a special podcast that we have created to present a platform to share deep and engaging conversation that helps changemakers and anyone seeking to find or maximize their life purpose to recharge, to restore, and reconnect for a better self and also for a better world. Today, I have the pleasure of having on the show a social innovator, a disruptor, a builder, someone who spent, like every other guest that's come on the show, a great deal of their time to just make the world a better place on a daily basis. So I have with me Prince Gideon Olanrewaju.
Drum
Um,
rolls.
yeah. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
Please
you so much
introduce
for the
yourself
invite.
to our audience.
Absolutely. So my name is Prince Gideon Olanrewaju, and I'm a chief executive officer of Area High. But before I talk about Area High, I'm going to talk about myself.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I'm an educational development practitioner who has been, academically trained and professionally trained as a, professional in the field of educational development. I have executive education from Harvard School of Education as well as Lagos Business School, and quite a number of master's degrees from the University of Sussex as well as University of Cambridge and McGill University. So this is me starting off from the end point of being a trained professional in the field. And over the last 10 to 12 years, I've served as the chief executive of Area High. So a lot of people would think, okay, what's Area High?
Okay. Yeah,
Area High
absolutely.
is Aid for Rural Education Access Initiative. It's a non-profit organization. And what we do is to design, deploy, and implement alternative and accelerated learning programs focused on skills development as well as learning, creating learning opportunities for disadvantaged populations.
Okay, wow, that's of course we know that it's really interesting to hear how we know education is very important. It doesn't matter
Absolutely.
at what level, whether it's basic or whether it's tertiary or at formal or informal levels. A big part of our life or our society development is in around the ability to actually have the right education for the right time,
Yes.
for the right seasons of our lives. So yeah, it's really good. It's really interesting to hear that you work in this space. I mean, that's also the beauty of our show because we bring people that work in different part of the society. So you work in education, you're disrupting the educational space, and you're
Absolutely.
transforming it as a transformational leader. So
Yeah.
it's welcome again for your time. Thanks for joining us again on this show.
Absolutely. A
So, like I
pleasure.
always do with all my guests, I mean, I always start with one beautiful question because everybody that comes on the show has something that qualifies them to be here. It's because they are social innovators.
Yeah.
They are making change happen. They are transforming society. They are doing something that they don't really necessarily have to do, but they commit to do it. And then I think for us, it's really important to be able to allow that great opportunity to allow them. So my first question, Mr. Gideon, what's your impact story? What's your why area high? Why how initially when you were introducing yourself, you talk about you've gone to Harvard, you've been to McGill, you've been to Sussex, you've been to Cambridge. You went to all these beautiful universities. Maybe you're supposed to be consulting in
Um,
with big companies or
yeah, Big
working in
Four,
Big Four and making some really
McKinsey,
good money.
and Deloitte
I'm
for
pretty sure.
investment banking.
Exactly. So you could work for anywhere, anybody you want to work for, but
True.
right now you're doing your own thing. You're building from the grassroots. You're
Yeah.
working traditionally, and definitely you're not making as much money as you would have made if you're working for the big four. But
Of
again,
course.
you have your reasons, so we want to know why.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think that's a very thoughtful question that I've always had the opportunity to respond to when I find myself on platforms like this. And I would say that my own social impact story has been shaped by that self-realization that I can channel my privilege in life to the benefits of other people. And what do I mean by that? As someone who was also relatively born into a low income family, I started off leveraging on many things or few things that many people do not have access to. The comfort of a very closely knitted family, as well as that opportunity to go to pretty much very great elementary schools. And I think that in itself informed how I developed academic prowess when I was very young. Now that translated into an intellectual capacity that allowed me to, win scholarships from a very tender age, from transitioning from secondary education to university. I was able to, get a number of scholarships. It was at that point when I got into the university, I started, engaging with some of the very intricate realities of good or quality education, particularly for those at the grassroots. So I studied biochemistry for my first degree, interestingly.
Okay.
And that was in Lautech, Ogbomoso. One of those times of being on campus and being in Ogbomoso was when I encountered for the first time these children that comes from all these Lebanese, yes, the Lebanese children, as well as those who are out of school. And I begin to wonder, why are these children on the streets and are not attending school? So that sense of curiosity made me engage them and say, why are you not in school? And we enrolled them in school alongside with some of my friends that we were under, a student-based organization called ANUNSA,
Okay.
All Nigerian United Nations Student Association. And it was shocking because after 1 week, they were not in school anymore.
Okay.
And that is one thing that also, further pricked my interest to say, children not attending school, we enroll them in school again, they are out of school. So there is a number of interconnected or intertwined
Why
factors
did they return back to the
back to the streets. And then because I was curious, I started asking questions. And that was when the foundation of what Area High does today was laid, right? So we started off as something called Learn to Lead Foundation, basically going across schools, conducting outreaches on how to promote the enrollment of children from low-income backgrounds into school. But that was the genesis, because over time our mandate did change. So this was in 2014. So we metamorphosed in 2017 into what Area High is today, as a leading organization leveraging on innovation, technology, and collaboration to promote foundational learning, digital equity, girls' education, and transition from school to work. So coming from a place of privilege, identifying a challenge in my environment, being prickled by a sense of curiosity and interest, galvanizing and mobilizing friends, volunteers, and resources into solving that problem from an uninformed angle to now acquiring capacity to be able to do it on a large scale. So it's interesting from how we have gone from doing 100, as far back, like 100 students as far back as 2014, to having a reach of about 1.5 million beneficiaries through our project as at of today. So if you ask me, what is the social impact story? That is how far we've come. That is where we are in a summary.
You've talked about how you transition from learn to lead into what Area High is
used
doing.
to, yeah.
But can you just speak to Area High in terms of, because right now this is what you do, and for some years now you've been able to build from zero.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a personal witness to some of how you transitioned the organization, and now you're still transitioning because there's a lot that's still going to happen.
Yes.
But can you just share with us that initial stage of, as a social entrepreneur, you've
Yeah.
made a choice. I mean, I think it's clear to you that, okay, now I don't want to work for anyone.
Yeah.
I just want to start this organization. I want to
Yeah.
make an impact, but I want to build a career out of it. And I want
Yeah.
to make sure that this is what I do on a full-time basis. But
Yeah.
then I want to, so as you begin to, as you begin to conceptualize the starting that clarity, and then
Yeah.
you register the organization, and you
Yeah.
begin to look for ideas and
Yeah.
projects and finding support and funding to begin to, how was that like?
Well, I would say it was extremely difficult. Just like for any random imagined leader working in the social development space in Nigeria, and you're not connected to anybody, and your foundation or passion project is not funded by your father out of celebrating a birthday, and you announce you want to start a foundation, and your father's friend decides to say, I'm donating 1 billion for you to execute project, which has happened in the past for many of us. We started from the scratch. But there's a couple of factors that really played a role in how Area High grew over time. The first thing that I saw was that I needed experiential knowledge on how to run an institution, because that is something that was very key for me from the start. Having spent about 2-3 years doing Learn to Lead and then transitioning to Area High, I saw that, okay, if I go in this part that I'm passionate about, there's a need for me to learn from those who are already doing the job and they are working in the field already. So I did a very short stint with Teach for Nigeria. So, I worked briefly with Teach for Nigeria to understand the underpinning requirements or on the ground realities of how to actually lead successfully and sustainably an institution like Area High. It was relatively a small time, but I would say I learned a great deal, working at Teach for Nigeria. That laid that foundation, gaining experiential knowledge from someone who is already doing it. Then another thing that helped along the way was that I saw that I needed expert knowledge, which is different from experiential knowledge. Expert knowledge, technical understanding of all the nitty-gritty. How do you design interventions that are scalable, that are replicable, that are sustainable? And I think that was what led to me saying I want to go for advanced graduate degree. Because I believe that when I started designing Area High, it was, about passion. But there's something I've always said over time, that passion is key, but capacity is king. There is no way you can effectively deploy innovative solutions to create systemic solutions to many of the problems we have without having the technical capacity. It's really important. So I knew that, okay, for me to do that, I either need to build that either academically or professionally. So in going for, a master's degree in education actually introduced me, because I used to tell people, for you to be an astute professional in this field, you need to have that theoretical understanding. So what are the things that feeds into why there is out of school children across the world? What are the things that feed into people having very low literacy and numeracy? Before you design your theory of change for a program, for example, you need to understand the contextual factors that is informing that problem. So that expert technical capacity development was another thing that I embraced, when I started. Another thing that, informed that transitioning was actually attracting and getting the right people. So when I started, it was pretty much volunteers, right? But I was identifying and mobilizing people that have aligned vision, people who strongly believe in what I was trying to do. And at the start, we are not paying people. We are all volunteers. The financial resources wasn't flowing, but there are people who are readily available to also give themselves to the work. And many of them, were part of that movement for a very long time, until the period we started making money to be able to pay for people's salaries and all of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think because if you think about it, like I think what you're trying to, if I take all those points you've raised, or all those ingredients that you've talked about,
Yeah.
it leads to one journey.
Yes.
Lean startup.
Yeah.
How do you get into your first product? Because people think that, most of the things that we all know this now, that people, a lot of people say, I'm passionate about this is enough. I have interest. I want the world to be better. Everybody wants the world to be better.
Of course.
But no founder, no investor
Yeah.
will just build upon the passion that you have. Everybody needs you to do something. So you don't, and there's a period of time where you need to spend a lot of time to start with what you have, which is
Absolutely.
basically what you're talking about, getting
Yeah.
volunteers, leveraging communities, leveraging individual relationship, and building those things that you can use to, first of all, begin something small.
Absolutely.
Prove that, creating your proof of concept that we would do in a regular,
Absolutely.
in a
That this
startup
can
environment.
work. Yeah.
That this is what we have done. Then you can now begin to
Scale.
do the narrative around your story. To say
Yes.
that we've done to this community. I remember when you came to Abuja, and
Yeah.
we always go to those communities and you go and
Yeah,
take pictures,
Orozo.
and then you talk about. So when you are curating that narrative,
Yeah.
then, but you can't just start saying
And then
that,
boom,
when you talk
straight to
about
the
1
top.
million, over 1 million
1.5 million
beneficiaries
beneficiaries,
now,
yeah.
people would just think that, no, but you didn't start with 1
was
million.
over time, not overnight.
You
Yeah.
started to just curate that, and I think that's the key word for me, for our listeners, for our audience, is that when, as a social innovator, one of the key important things that, yes, passion is important.
Yeah.
It's very important to just want to be
change the
angry
world.
about something, to want
Yeah.
to make change happen. But more importantly, in the midst of that, is that as you begin to structure, the very first step is usually about those baby steps of
Absolutely.
what do you have? What
Yeah.
can you leverage? Who
Yeah.
are your
What can you
friends?
put
Who are your
together?
volunteers?
Yeah.
Who are your mentors?
Yeah.
What can you leverage to
Yeah.
show that this is possible?
Absolutely.
Then I don't think at that point when the success point, we'll get to that later.
Absolutely.
Will always be there.
Yeah.
So the other question I always like to have, now it's okay to talk about these things now because that you've been able to validate those things. Right?
Yes.
But then I always try to reflect, to think about it. What are the 3 things that you wish you knew that you maybe could have catapulted your journey faster? Maybe some of the mistakes or challenges that you had to deal with at the initial stage will have been avoided. But what are those 3 things that you knew better, and you think that people, if you are going to tell anybody in your 5-year-old self, Gideon,
Yeah.
who just like
coming into the
7 years,
space,
and what
yeah.
will you tell them, or what are the 3 things that you wish you knew at
Earlier.
that time, earlier, that you probably catch on with later on that
Yeah.
now worked for you?
Fantastic question. I think, it's always one thing to reflect on. One key thing would be, the first one is building a very strong alternative financing mechanisms. So what do I mean? Either evolving or emerging social entrepreneurs believe ultimately, quite a large, population of them believe that the only source of financing for your institution, either, a non-profit, a business enterprise, or social enterprise, is financial grants, right? But over time, I've, understood that there are so many alternative financing sources that can allow you either in the first or second, year or third year of your operations to actually invest into the work that you're doing, right? It was later on that I believed that you can actually curate research services, for example. It's interesting because over the last 2-3 years, I could say 35% of our funding
Coming from
is coming from research. And I'm thinking, okay, when we started, research was actually something that many of us were good at, but we didn't look at it. We were only looking for implementation funding. So that was one thing I felt every, social entrepreneur, whether you're emerging or you're evolving, you need to understand that there are alternative financing sources you can leverage and explore to, build and buttress the financial sustainability or viability of your institution. It is really important. I knew that earlier. The number of years through which we struggled financially to be able to pay people, to be able to, food programming cost, administrative cost, or, many of these, interesting costs that comes with running an institution, we might not have struggled with it. That is one thing. The second thing that I think we started doing well, and when I say we, I mean Area High started doing well, not at the beginning, but at a later stage, was actually documenting our impact stories well, right? So when I started, I was doing it as an individual. And I think that's the mistake I did not make that mistake. I realized that from the start, that there's a distinction in between your personal brand as the pioneer of an initiative and your organizational brand. That is one feelings that I think I find many young individuals working in the social development space in Nigeria, they do over time. It's a professional blunder. Many of them do not have a separate identity away from their organizational brand. If you remove them today from being the CEO or ED of their institution, they will cease to exist as a professional, as a person, as a personal identity. I did not make that error because from the start, there's a huge distinction between Olanrewaju, which is my social development name, and Area High as a brand. So I used to brag about that if I cease to be the CEO of Area High today, I will still function as an educational development practitioner that is qualified to contribute substantively to, designing effective interventions anywhere. But one thing that I did not do then was doing that impact storytelling for the organization separately and for myself separately. Okay, I started that later on. Had it been I knew, I would have done to ensure that from the very start. So
there's a complete
exactly. As I'm telling my story as a development professional, the organization's work is also being effectively documented. Leveraging on many of these digital platforms that we have is one thing that we are now doing well. I pride myself that Area High's branding and communications is on point, right? There's so many people who do not know me, but know the organization because of our digital imprint. So I think that footprint, I think that all social entrepreneurs, either imagine or evolving, should take that very seriously from the start. Ensure that you are able to build a very substantive digital presence from the start, documenting the stories of the work that you're doing, regardless of how small it is. It will add up over time because that in itself allows them to build something I call public perception as well as credence for the organization and for themselves as well.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you on that one because I think that if you think about it, it's just being able to understand that the journey, it's also important.
Absolutely.
As much as the destination.
Yes.
And the destination is very interesting because it changes over time.
Over time, yes.
As you evolve, as you become aware, as you learn, as you make mistakes, as you deal with challenges, you become better, you have more understanding, your insights are better there, you become led in a different way, and then eventually, and that it's helpful to be able to, because again,
that is the part of the experience of being a builder.
Exactly, and I don't think that one of the biggest things that we wanted to be able to, I think we still have to do a lot of outreach and talking and engagement to make people to understand that.
Yep.
Because part of the problem that reflects on our society is that idea that when I'm building something, yes, I might be the founder, I might be the person that is starting it, but I want to think about something that is outside of me as an individual.
Absolutely, so that your legacy can go on even when you leave.
What does it look like? What's your moment of validation? When you knew that, because starting is not enough.
Yes.
Knowing that there's a problem to solve is not a problem. A lot of people are doing it, but not everybody eventually gets it to keep it that way and keep it going for a long time.
Absolutely.
So, but then at one point, do you realize that, okay, I think this can work. I will not be tempted to go and get a job because I have the degree to go find a job somewhere and do other things. But now, so what's the moment of, when do you know that this whole Area High commitment is no going back?
That's a very Well, I will say that for every founder, there will be various moments of validation, right? But everything will just add up just in time. But one that really plays a critical role for me is away from development, away from ideation and then development, or bringing both of them together, conceptualization, deployment, and measurement, which I can think are stages of this impact process that we were talking about. There's also that critical stage of thought leadership. The moment I felt that policymakers or decision makers seems to believe in the ideas that I was sharing, either in spoken or written form, I knew that there was something there that if I keep doing would not only culminate into growth for myself, but also for the Area High brand. And I think that moment was being invited or being selected as one of two youth representatives to join former British Prime Minister Gordon's brand delegation to the United Nations General Assembly in 2018. That was a turning point. Because it's a very relative big community of young people working on education globally. And, we were asked to put in an application based on our ideas on how we think that global education can be rebranded to transform learning opportunities for children. And, I just during the application, based on what I've seen, as always, we're always applying for stuff. And it came back positive, and they said, you know what, we're flying you all expense paid to New York, and you're going to be on many panels, at first, because the belief that we had from those who were before us was that opportunities like that are quote and unquote tokenistic. But I would tell anybody the award has been really, really been a different experience for Area High. It's been that one organization that keeps giving to my dream and my vision for the organization. But it started from that point, going to New York, being in the same room, engaging with so many stakeholders, allowed the organization to now attract a lot of opportunities based on me being in that kind of a place and talking about the vision that we have for education. I met One Young World, Deloitte from that singular event. It was the same event where I met someone who later informed how I met Prince Harry and Meghan Markle about 1 or 2 years after. So that singular opportunity provided that validating moment to say that, you know what, it seems that this thing that I'm doing, people believe in the idea and the direction through which the idea, the dimensions through which the idea is manifesting itself.
And which is really interesting because I like the way this is coming because we have this theory and then the theory is being validated from the things that you're sharing. So we talk about opportunity will make preparedness. So
yes.
It wasn't really just, some people just, they see you in New York, they say that, don't worry, it's just lucky. Maybe because it went, no. But they won't know that all you did was just sit down on your computer.
Yes.
And then put up what you know to be true.
Yeah.
And then wait for it to come back.
Absolutely.
And maybe beat 1,500
people,
other people
who are also sharing the ideas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's that simple. People always think that, because of the way we're raised in this part of the world.
Yeah.
There's this idea that when people do really competitive stuff, it's a lie. It's not going to.
It's law.
You already know who they will give you.
Yes.
But I think that sometimes just believing in yourself enough.
Yeah.
Having the depth because you've worked on yourself.
Yes,
because you cannot,
absolutely.
The confidence to even put things on paper.
Yeah.
So just know that it's not being.
Yes.
It's coming from over time.
Yes, an informed perspective. Yeah.
Of what is happening.
Absolutely.
And you have framed it up. You have the narrative that is, you're rooted in what you're trying to do. And
Absolutely.
that's what will give you the confidence to think that whatever I have to say, the world leaders can listen.
Absolutely.
And if the world leader can listen and somebody's asking me what I think and I can articulate it in a form or in an application, and then someone look at me and say, okay, this is really good.
Could take a chance on you.
Then when the opportunity comes, it just, the boomerang effect begins to happen.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
social impact for a lot of people, that I always say this in my mentoring sessions and all the time, that rule number one is, yes, you're passionate. Yes, you're hungry. Go do the work first.
Absolutely.
In hiding, in secret. Understand what's happening. Be rooted in what you're
talking
about.
Get the groundedness.
Don't do social climate change today.
Health
tomorrow. Human rights next tomorrow. Education after.
Economic empowerment on Friday.
All in the space of 3 years. You've been around everywhere.
You're
not grounded.
You're very valid. There is someone, even two people at top of my head that we used to have this back and forth conversation around the dichotomy of generalization and specialization. Yeah. The belief that when you start this work, you have to learn about everything. But I tell them that the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, of the 17 goals, for example, gives us that streamlined Now 18. Lord of God.
Well, I mean, just last week they added the space into it. So
Hey,
it's not
that's
18
good. I like
months.
the sound of that. So people who are interested in space, which I think there are a couple of people
yeah.
too can join the train, allows you to streamline so that you can have a clarity of purpose and a sense of direction. You see, those two things are really important. I would rather become a specialist in a subject that, in terms of policy, practice, and research, I'm very grounded in, than being than being a generalist that can talk about climate change. Of course, from an informed or knowledge perspective, you can have that. But when it comes to being a practitioner, it is only very as good for you to be a specialist in a subject.
I tell you, because I think for me it's about the concept of complex problems.
Yes.
Everything is all
Very, very integrated.
interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
I mean, as a researcher, I do a lot of interdisciplinary research. It's not really more about being able to bring different perspectives
together.
into solving a single problem.
Yeah.
Different. So if that is what you're doing, you're not like you're talking about education now. You can do a research or walk around or work on implement a project that talks about health,
even on climate education, or menstrual health education.
All of those things. But that's not a problem. What is a problem is when you begin to do something totally different
from the core.
Because what will happen is that you're not there. You just surface.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no depth and everything, and eventually. And
you got to fizzle out.
Stakeholders see through this.
Oh, absolutely.
If they ask you questions, you're doing an application, and they will see through that. Oh, you're just jumping around the bush. You're not really deep. You're not grounded. And grounding is important.
It's very much important.
Stage.
Yeah.
You can do multiple things later on in life. Like if you stop at your high today, or you transition from your high and start doing something totally different in technology or innovation, there is a pathway there. It's completely different.
Absolutely.
So it's always going to be different from. Yeah. So I think we sort of like answered this question in a way. Like we sort of like already like talked about it, but I'll just ask it anyway so that in case you want to add a few things in terms of about what insight will you share with emerging entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, people that are just like, again, trying to come into this space. They have ideas. They have resilient, they're very knowledgeable, they're smart enough, they're leaders. They know that, okay, this is a problem I want to solve. This is how I want to solve it. I'm motivated to know I want to make this my life work. But then, I mean, they're doing stuff, but they're not yet there. So what insight, what other,
fantastic,
the ones that you've already shared?
Fantastic. 3 things, actually. The first thing, talent management. Second thing, strategy development. Third thing, impact measurement. So I'm going to take those 3 things one after the other. The first one, strategy development. I cannot say it more than the point I'm about to make, that as an organization, you need to have a defined strategy. If it's going to be, a yearly strategy, a 5-year strategy, or a 10-year strategy. And your strategy in itself is some sort of a clear-cut understanding of how you want to translate your vision into programmatic interventions that can deliver tangible outcomes with measurable impact. Not very much of actors, quote and unquote, in our space are actually implementing programmatic interventions that are delivering tangible outcomes with measurable impact. And that is why those keywords are very, very definitive. People are doing programmatic interventions without tangible outcomes. People are doing programmatic interventions with tangible outcomes with no measurable impact. Now, that's a concern. You need to be able to sit down. So I was talking about going to Harvard. So I spent 15 days. There is actually something, so it's a program called Strategic Perspective on Nonprofit Management. And it talks quite about everything in designing interventions, not only at the supervision level, but the ability to be able to devise systemic solutions that will not only change the lives of one person, but can actually reach 10 million people. And there's a lot of case studies of those interventions, very, neated, grounded solutions that are, built in the field of either education, health, women economic empowerment, and many other areas like that. But you can only do that when you have a clear-cut strategy. Now, inside a strategy, there is something also very important, which is culture. Now, there's this very popular saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And why is culture important? This doesn't concern non-governmental individuals. I'm talking about non-governmental organizations. And when I mean NGIs, you also know them. Those one-man shows, we are not even talking about them. We are talking about people who are building institutions, who are working with people. there is a way that even if you have a fantastic strategy as an organization, you need to have a very great culture. Now, what do I mean by that? Number one, what defines the work ethic of your institution? At the point when I saw that we were getting resources, designing and deploying solutions in area high, we developed this mantra called ruthless execution. And what we mean by that is that for you as a donor or funder, if you invest, quote and unquote, or give us money, unquote, we would deliver times 2 of the expected deliverables for you as a funder, but you can be rest assured that the lives of the beneficiaries you've supported us to reach will also be transformed for life. Now, that sense of ruthless execution has been imbibed as a culture by all humans of Area High. So if there's a program that they are part of, they know they need to give it their 100%. Culture is also how many days in a week do you work? What is the sense of solidarity that your staff members have for the institution when you're going through struggles? Now, we're on a podcast. We need to say the truth. Last year, for 3 months or 2 months stretch, the organization was going through financial crisis. We couldn't pay salaries for 2 months. And we used to do check-ins. How are you doing, guys? And they keep saying, boss, fire on. We are behind you. It is a sense of culture, that belief, that commitment. Exactly. Yeah. So if you say you have a fantastic strategy and that culture that defines, the work ethic, the organizational bond that exists in people giving their all for the brand, for the vision is not there, then your strategy is weak. So strategy development goes alongside with culture is really important. Now, moving to talent management. Across the world, human resource management is a problem, especially in an era where we recruit and fire simultaneously, especially the Gen Z era.
In Nigeria.
Yeah, in Nigeria.
In our own community, in our own life, it's even 3 times
more wars.
The motivation is different.
Exactly.
The expectation
is different.
Obligation
Absolutely. So
different.
talent identification, retention, management is difficult, not only in our sector, but let's even now limit it to international development. Many people who work in our space are not, especially those who study here, are not at the very basis trained to work in this space. How many people go to school to study social entrepreneurship or to study non-profit management as a course? It's only recently that I'm or project management, program management, M&E. No, many of us stumble into the space based on passion, and then by luck, by chance, by circumstance, we learn the areas we build specialization in. Now, it is very important that not only are we not recruiting people who are professionally trained to work in the space, even if we are going to retain or attract those kind of talent, it comes at a very high cost. So at first, for me at Area High as well, it was extremely difficult. How do we work with people who have that skill set, not only the passion, but who have the technical capacities to be able to deliver? It was long run that we now started developing a kind of system. So we have something right now called the Programs and Impact Fellowship. So what we do is identify youth corps members, recruit them into a program. So it's like a workforce development program for international development. So when they come into the program, not only are they serving as, facilitators for some of our, learning programs that are facilitation based, we also deploy them to departments within the organization based on their preferred interest. So if they decide to work in international development over time, they have gone through some sort of a foundry, like a talent development program that allows them to identify a field within the international development space they want to work. So talk of communications, program management, M&E, or human resource development, or community engagement, which are areas where we need professionals in to work in the organization. I wish I knew that earlier, as an institution, because the talent is also scarce, especially if you want to work with people who are really qualified. Because I tell people, organizational capacity in itself is a summation of individual brilliance. You cannot do great work as an organization when you have half-baked professionals. And trust me, in development, we have got the number of that. You just see 6, 7 people bringing head together, and 5 of them do not even know 30% of what they're doing. They just hold title, program manager, project officer, which is a big concern. To do great work, you need good people. And when I mean good people, I mean sound professionals. So people, emerging professionals or evolving professionals must have a clear-cut understanding of how to manage their talent, recruitment to start with. Now, let's talk of retention. Retention is also a problem. You go through the stress of hiring professionals, and under 1-2 years, they already want to move on. especially with our millennials and Gen Z generation. Is it that they want to jump into graduate studies straight, or they want to take a new job straight off? It's a big problem that people are, facing within the space. And I think people designing some system of reward or recognition allows them to retain talent more. And also helping people to have a clear understanding of their personal and professional development goals. And I say this because I'm working with some set of professionals now that are making them understand if you do well, because we are in an era where I want to go outside the country to do my master's, is becoming a pandemic, which is not bad. People having the desire to acquire more knowledge and skills, not bad. But having gone through that stage myself, I see the distinction it brings when you are in the classroom and you are not only when you are bringing professional field experience to the theoretical conversations.
It's designed that way. That's what graduate study is supposed to look like.
Exactly.
You must have some post-graduation of bachelor experience.
Exactly.
That allows you to condense, and then you are very rooted in what you are
Absolutely.
learning. You can take that knowledge back into the field, into your professional space.
I need to tell you, when I went to Cambridge after Sussex and McGill, I was like a king in my class. Because once a professor talks about a subject, and many of them know us per application and our CV, they just turn to me and say, Gideon, so what do you think? And most of the people that I have in class are just maybe who have 1 or 2 years of work experience, and I've done maybe 6 or 7 years by then. So I make them, the people working with me, to say that, you see, all those things you're doing right now gives you that foundational basis for you to build on your academic aspiration. That is really important. So not only do we need to attract and develop, we need to retain as well. That is what I mean by talent management. And the very last one is impact measurement. Now, this is really, really key for me, because I believe as practitioners that we claim to be doing the work and we're changing lives, the proof of your own emotional investment and financial investment of your donors and funders is for you to be able to provide evidence of impact and sustainability. It is really key. There is no point mobilizing resources to show that this is what we are doing if you are not collecting data, analyzing the data, and presenting the data for your stakeholders. Is really important. So I'm really shocked. And I say that in itself is a very principal tool for large-scale implementation or large-scale sustainability. I've seen now that, especially if this is if an actor is doing this for the long run, and this is what they do full time, you cannot excuse yourself away from effective impact measurement strategies. It's really important. Because so you need to continue to collect data and project the data and be transparent about the data as well.
So I think that at the end of the day, when we get to that point where, as innovators, as leaders, you need to think about all of these things, because as you begin to journey through the process of creating value or making change and getting results, if you do not think about those things you're not talking about your talent, you're not grounding yourself, I think it will be a struggle.
Yes.
Because it's like you're learning on the job so fast. And if you don't learn fast enough, the speed at which you just become overwhelmed, you become frustrated. And I think that being able to allow our listeners to gather that understanding from the get-go. That's why I wanted to ask that question, because I ask it all my guests, because I feel like nobody teach you a lot of things. You
Absolutely.
just learn a lot of things
even in the best of business schools, you won't learn some of these things.
And it's even particularly different because in our own context of society, if you look at the international development space for locally owned, locally organization, most of the top leaders, they like transition into the space without being trained. They've been there for so long, from the late days of dictatorship and all of that, and now the ones that have some sophistication, some really good expertise, are the ones that I work with
global organizations
who are working locally. And they've been able to get that
expertise
because of that. But the locally grown ones, it's just like gather into and then so we need to begin to think about how do you transition into being intentional. Because one of these things that I'm really happy is happening right now, and it's also part of the reason why I'm doing this particular series of the Meet the Founders on the podcast, is because we want to show young generation impact makers that not only don't think the NGO is for somebody that is poor or that cannot. You can go overseas,
of course, get
all your education, go to all the best schools, and come back home to create change.
It's interesting because our former minister, sorry for cutting you short, who is also a former governor, created the Center for CDD.
Yes. The one. Yeah, I don't know. Is it Center for
Yes.
Democracy and Development?
Yes, Governor Fayemi.
Fayemi, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, he started that, and CDD is one of Nigeria's leading,
No, I think that
think
they
tank.
are one of those silent. They're doing so well.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you don't know the story,
Exactly,
if you're not really in this
space, you may
won't
not
really
understand
know them,
exactly.
and that is one of the stories of locally
Grown,
locally founded.
absolutely.
And then they compete at the same level with
some global
ones.
institutions.
No,
Yeah,
the global ones. Locally,
yeah.
I mean, they are not all over Africa. There's CCT Africa right
Oh,
now. They have
interesting.
In Ghana, they have in
I did not even know that.
Even the newer ones as well. Yaga, Budget, they're all
exactly.
opening offices
In New York.
offices in Nigeria
Exactly.
now. So and these are organizations that just about 10 years ago,
Yes.
a young person just was
conceived an
frustrated
idea,
with something
yes.
and then started to do something.
Absolutely.
And then for 10 years, they've earned a salary.
Yeah.
Very important. To meet their own personal
needs,
obligations and live a good life.
And also invest in
make
people
impact
while
and
building the
and
institution.
And then the institution is existing. And
Yeah.
That's the narrative that's the story we're
Absolutely.
talking about.
So
that
it is doable locally.
You can't start something because sometimes, think about it.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do with Area High
Yeah.
is not any different from what Adela did or what Flutterwave is trying to do. But
Absolutely.
these guys are cashing out in millions of dollars. So you can as well just go do a startup and
Instead
start
of
thinking
doing
about development
absolutely.
and the same effort at the same time. And then in 10 years, you're a millionaire in dollars.
Yes.
But of course, you won't become a millionaire in dollars doing development.
Of
but
course.
At least you can live a good life. You can feed your family. You can do
Absolutely.
You can have
and
reasonable
enjoy
comfort.
the perks of life. And I mean, that's one of the things we actually need to talk about because that is one thing that I think I always find the avenue to chip into conversations about what it means to actually create in this space sustainably and also uphold the vision across time is the financial sustainability for the founder or the visionary without compromising the integrity or financial accountability of the organization. And I say it often time because a lot of people wonder how some of us makes end meet without stealing, quote and unquote. And I would say that it is the investment in personal capacity and professional competency. I mean, for the last 4 years, I've done huge figures from consulting.
That is different from your organization.
Absolutely.
People will not even know that.
Exactly.
People will assume that your personal life is being funded by
the organization,
Meanwhile,
which is
reverse.
exactly.
You're taking money from your private pocket to run the organization sometimes.
Absolutely. It's even important that there is a model that Area High runs that I've taught almost all my friends, right, on how to commission. Fast Track, which is our literacy and numeracy intervention, is our biggest portfolio program right now. That's more than $1.2 million. How did we do that? All our programs are always indigenously developed and personally funded to pilot. And then we take the evidence of implementation of impact to the market.
So it goes back to the whole point of proof of concept.
Absolutely.
So nobody, I know that already.
So I remember a consultancy that I did. I was paid $5 million. So I was still dating my wife then. And I collected the 5 million and he said, we don't soft, like money's around. And I said, this 5 million is going to the pilot of it. And he said, no way. And it's interesting because it was the pilot of Fast Track. We actually did the launch of Fast Track here. Yes. And the first year was 200 children in Camp David with one Dr. David, interestingly. And it is that program this year, we're reaching 20,000 beneficiaries from that program.
So which is the point about, again, you have to be vested enough to have it goes back to your
absolutely
about strategy, about understanding at what point do you. It's the principle remains the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're a founder, people are selling their houses, they are taking equity loans on their houses in America
to be able to work.
To be able to found a prototype of
the solution that they are creating.
Because, then after having the prototype, after having that proof of concept, they can take that program to the market and then investors can now come in
and say this is something we can put our money in.
Putting money into it.
Yes.
But it's really, there's so much uncertainty, lack of distrust in our society that except you're already up there, it is really difficult for someone to fund you because of an idea.
Yes.
They can upgrade. You have your pilot, you have your proof. They can expand your impact, they can increase it, they can help you improve upon it. Yeah. But to just say, all I am trying to do is just ideas. This is what we're doing. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Everything has to be based around how far have you gone? How vested are you?
Yes.
Okay, you've got something very small or nothing at all. Seed investment from other projects. That's why I also recommend to people to just, when you want to incorporate your organization as a social entrepreneur, do a limited by guarantee.
Yes.
But one of the advantage of doing that is that
can also
it allows you to get money.
Away from just
to pilot and
Yes.
get your surpluses from the business
Yes.
or from the program that you're running.
Yes.
That allows you to create a model to because again, the speed at which you need to innovate might not be as fast as which your founders or your beneficiaries is going to respond.
Exactly.
So if you might need to try something on your own first, prove that it can work, then you can now begin to approach your stakeholders or your beneficiaries to put some funding into it. So it's really beautiful that you mentioned that, because I think that knowledge, that understanding, that awareness
needs to be there.
It's important for people that are just, and I think that all the people that are reaching out, that are like, that have successfully learned this, that have successfully done this, need to speak a lot more about it. Because people just assume that if you are doing well as a founder, then you're doing well because the organization is doing well.
Yes.
Sometimes it can be the case. That point where the goal is that. That's the goal. The goal is, for example, you should be able to pay yourself 6 figures in dollars from the income that your organization is making.
Absolutely.
Because that is how much you're worth in terms of the expertise that you're putting into the organization.
But it's very funny because many funders or pioneers do not even pay themselves for many years and would rather invest that kind of money for for staff members.
At that time, that is the strategy, because again, that's the way to grow. That's the way to scale how fast you could get there. But when you get there, you can now draw on that equity.
Absolutely.
That is what we call sweat equity. It's not lost. That
energy, it's never lost. I mean, especially if there is an emotional connection between a pioneer and their ideas or their institution, which I think is actually, if you ask me, the number one requirement to actually survive in the space. You must love what you do. You must be bonded with it.
You can't solve a problem. If you are in the regular
9-to-5 job.
Regular entrepreneurship space. Money is the equator.
Yeah.
It's easy. It's either the product is making money
or not. And then you can close up if it's not making money and start another business.
Well, with social impact, it's really tough to let go, because it's like disappointment to the passion that you have signed up to, the people that believe in you, to the vision that you have sold to people for several years.
Yes.
You can stop a business and start another one.
Absolutely, as long as you are not making money.
You can sell your business and go start
another one.
Most of our top entrepreneurs that's what they're doing. They will build something,
and then sell it off.
Take that money to start something else. So, but you really can't do that, because if you sell a hair today, your hair is worth $1, because according to government,
non-profit
money that you even if you have been able to build some equity over time, that money will go back into another organization that is doing something similar. So it's not like the same. So you can't just pack up back and go
and say you're leaving.
You will lose yourself as a person, except you're really super strong. I doubt anybody will lose that level of
exactly, especially with the investment that's been made over the years.
We're getting to the end, so I'll just
fantastic.
ask one, maybe one or two more.
Right.
So in 10 years, what do you look like? What do you think? What does impact look like? What does success look like for Area High?
Well, I think one key thing would be, number one, we are operational in all 36 states in Nigeria. That's really key for us. I mean, right now we do 18 states by virtue of 1 or 2 programs that we're running, our fast track program and our digital skills accelerator for women and girls. So one key thing would be that in 2034, we're operational in all 36 states. I mean, that is, the national mandate. The regional mandate is that we are operational in at least 12 African countries. We work on a very distinctive team of foundational learning, which is supporting children below the ages of 10 to read and write and do basic math in record time. And we have an innovative program called Fast Track that we are leveraging, that also leverages on translanguaging. And we see that this is a solution that has worked in Nigeria. And right now we're in the, a regional scaling process to ensure that in countries like Rwanda, DRC Congo, Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, we can scale our solution to also help them. So that regional expansion dream is also alive, and I hope by 2034 we've achieved that. The very last thing, of course, we want to continue to exist. It's sustainability.
I was waiting for that. I was thinking that okay.
Sustainability. It is for every passionate, competent, strong-hearted founder or visionary. Your prayer always is that you wake up every morning and you know that what you've labored hard for over the last 10, 15 years is still very much in existence. Absolutely. So that is one vision as well. And for that to happen, we need the right people. So I hope we continue to, retain the best of the best in the field, as well as having access to tangible financial resources, because we cannot do without that. Last one is actually to ensure many of our solutions have been, incorporated into mainstream education, because that is the vision. We are building solutions that can be adopted by the government to solve some of the most challenging difficulties we have within the Nigerian educational system. That is the vision by 2034. And we know with God, all things are possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do agree with you. I think that 10 years is not a long time.
It's not a long
just
time.
about,
I mean,
but it's also enough time
to
to
do
achieve all these things that you're saying
absolutely,
and to be able to.
absolutely.
Because if you consistently go within, if you look at 10 years ago, where you
Yeah.
are and where you are,
And right now,
you know what's actually, there's this old theory around the first 10 years is usually, so what it
it's
takes
always
to-
very difficult.
the most difficult. So what
Yeah.
you achieve in 10 years will take you 3 years to achieve in another 10, in another, so what you're probably going to do in another 10 years is what you're probably be thinking about 30 years ordinarily. Thank you very much. It's really been a very wonderful
Absolutely,
time having
really
you
exciting
on
being
this
here.
show this afternoon.
Thank you.
To have this very inciting, very engaging, very energetic conversation.
Absolutely,
You've been very energetic as
absolutely.
always. I really appreciate you for
Thank you
taking
so
the
much
time
for
to be
the
part of it.
invite.
Thank you. Again, this is Impact. Again, this is Chatting Dog.
Dog.
My name is Olalika Oshinkoya. I'm your host. Please subscribe to our channel. Subscribe to get notification about the show, to be sure that you can continue to engage with our future guests on the show, to also make sure that you are able to connect with the community and you can continue to get information, get insight. Because for us at Chatting Dog, it's about restoring, reconnecting, and making the world a better place for ourselves and then for our world. So thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.